And welcome to the Shaman's View, the perspective from the invisible world. I'm Dr. Alberto Villoldo, and I am your shaman. And even more than being your shaman, I am here to remind you to awaken your own inner shaman, that person that mediates between the visible and the invisible world, that is not seduced by either one of these worlds. Today, I'd like to speak to you about honoring the ancestors. How do we honor those wounded and flawed people that became our parents and that we were born into their families, that we had absolutely nothing in common with? Even the ones that brought us joy and happiness and wonderful lives, they are so different from who we are that we oftentimes suspected that the stork dropped us off at the wrong house. We really should have been dropped off at our best friend's house, the ones that had the really cool parents. So, before we go into how we honor the ancestors and set them free, so that we can release them into their own journeys, so that we can break the chain that has kept us being born into each other's arms and as families for so many generations. And we can then create an original story for ourselves, freed from the drama that runs in families and from the biological curses, the genetic curses that are passed down from one generation to the next. So if you have heart disease or breast conditions or cancer or dementia, Alzheimer's, we know that it runs in families. We know that if you have the APOE4 gene from one of your ancestors, from your mother or your father, that your chances of having Alzheimer's are 16 times higher than the ordinary person. For the shaman, these are really interesting scientific data, but they are not reality because we are not our genes. We're only 10% of our genes. The other 90% is our dreams. But in order to craft a truly original life for ourselves, we have to come to honor the ancestors and set them free and set ourselves free from what in the Amazon are called the generational curses, the drama and the illnesses that run in our family. First, let me tell you a little bit about reincarnation, about how this mechanism works from the perspective of the shaman. And I'm going to speak to you from my perspective as a shaman and from the years that I've spent with the medicine men and women of the Andes and the Himalayas. So incarnation and reincarnation follows very clear lines. We're born into the families where we need to learn the lessons that are going to most further us in our spiritual journey. And we're oftentimes born into families that we have a long reincarnatory history with, that we have been together before many, many times. Now, this is not the best news in the world. This is oftentimes bad news because we could not fix it the last time that we were together in Africa or in Egypt or in Atlantis or wherever we were born into each other. We could not fix it and heal it. And we had to come again into the same nest in the hopes that we would get it right this time. We don't always get the exact family that we need. We get the best available that day. So frequently, you will have parents that have the same stories and themes and dramas that you come with, but that you have nothing in common with at all. And then sometimes you will get these wonderful, wonderful families that you will grow into and feel a tremendous amount of love, but only if you behave in certain ways, follow certain rules, and know what the rules are and live according to them. If you step out of those bounds, you are in deep trouble. So, what we want to do today, I want to share with you a process a ceremony for setting the ancestors free so that we can break those chains and those bonds that keep us reincarnating with each other with tremendous futility, unable to break free from the tremendous momentum of this joint karma that we have with our family of origin. And so that when we are able to release the ancestors, we can also release the future generations, our children's children, set them free for their own destiny and not to have to continue to relive the tired, worn out, dreary stories of our families. So stay with me for a second. And the first thing that I want you to do is to open your sacred space, what in the Andes they call the Huiracocha, which is that eighth chakra that is right above our heads, this radiant orb, this radiant sun that is actually not really a chakra. It's who we are in between incarnations. It's an eighth energy center that is depicted in every culture. You see it as the light around the Buddha or the halo around the Christ and the apostles. We all have this sun, this radiant sun above our heads that when we're born basically downloads all of the information from our previous lifetimes into our nervous system, our endocrine and our nervous system, and informs us about all that we have been in the past, all of our previous reincarnatory history. Now imagine how this information then collides with the information that we get from our genetics, from our mother and father, from our family line. And these two ancestries coincide at this moment in time in you and in me. So, the first thing we want to do is we want to learn how to spread and expand this eighth chakra. Those of you who've been with me before, you know how to do this, but let's do it together. Bringing your hands to your heart center in prayer pose and finding your breath. And then on an in breath, beginning to bring your hands up into this radiant sun above your head, into this energy center that exists outside of time, and expanding it around you, expanding your light around yourself. This is an energy center that exists outside of time and infinity, who you have always been, the part of you that witnessed the birth and death of galaxies and that manifest in time as you. This is your Huiracocha. This is a Quechua word that means the source of life, the source of the sacred, the source of you and I. We have an individual Huiracocha, what we would call the soul in the West. And this is who we are embodied. So we do this so that we can step outside of ordinary time because the release of the ancestors has to happen outside of time because you're breaking the reincarnatory chain that occurs within time. So we have to drop in between the moments, step outside of ordinary time so that we can set all of the ancestors free, all of those ancestors that hope that perhaps you might heal it for them as well. And in doing so, not only are we offering them a pathway to healing, but we're also setting free our children's children. We're not communicating these generational curses that, as we spoke earlier, are the stories and the dramas that run in families, together with the genetics that run in family. That in the Bible, they say that the sins of the father will be passed down for 7 generations. How do we break those chains so we don't condemn our children so that we don't condemn our children to continue to live an iteration of our own lives or live in struggle with trying to fix it. Remember when you were young and you said to yourself, I will never become my mother. I will never be like my father. And then you look at yourself in the mirror one day and you go, oh my God, I've become my mother, or I've become my father. So we want to break free for ourselves, for the ones that came before us, and for the ones that will come after us. And to do that, we have to step outside, break free from ordinary time. So let's strengthen the opening of our Viracocha again, hands to your heart, and set your intention to summon your ancestors, to invite them to gather around a sacred fire with you in timelessness, in infinity. This is an act of power and an act of love that the medicine woman, that the medicine man makes. We are healing and releasing the ancestors, setting them free so that you can set yourself free. And on an in breath, bringing your hands up and into this radiant orb, into this radiant sun above your head, and expanding it around you, enveloping yourself in timelessness, outside of time in infinity, and summoning your ancestors, even if you do not know who they are, calling them, calling upon them, your biological ancestry, your mother's mother's mother, your father's father, your grandmothers and your grandfathers, summoning them. And what I'd like you to do is to get a glimpse, to ask for understanding of the family dramas that run in your family. You know the effects of this. You know the beliefs that are come with them. You know the stories that are associated with these dramas. The families where the woman is never able to find love, or where the wife is always betrayed by the husband, or the where the male of the family dies alone and loveless and an alcoholic. We all know what those stories are that run in your family. I'd like you to recall them, one, two, or three of these stories. And I'd like you to see the line of ancestors behind these stories that lived and died unhappy lives, that lost everything they loved, that died young, that lived long and sick lives, wheelchair bound, bedridden. Look at the stories of your ancestors, of your biological ancestors, and summon them. And I'd like you to reach down to your heart center and offer them your love and release them of those stories. Thank them. I'd like you to begin by thanking them. Thank them for all of the gifts that you were given. Thank them for those gifts. Forgive them for the way those gifts were badly offered to you. And thank them for who they were, for the courageous lives they led, for the tragedies that they lived. Thank them. Gratitude here is the key. Gratitude is the key. And then I'd like you to take a stick, a toothpick, maybe a piece of paper you've rolled up, and we're going to put those tragedies, those stories of the ancestors, those curses, we're going to put them into the fire so that we can set the ancestors free and we can honor them for the courage that they had, for the suffering that they went through. But first, we need to put the drama, those tragic stories, the tired, worn out stories that you have seen repeated over and over and over again. And repeat to yourself, I set myself free to become the author of my own story, not the victim of the story, but the storyteller, not the character in the drama, but the author of a new story, of a creative, of an original story. And I honor all of you who came before me. And I'd like you to see this lineage extending into the future. Remember, you have stepped outside of ordinary time. And I'd like you to see this line extending into the future, your children and their children, and to set them free. I, with my love, set you free. I set you free that you may become the authors of your own story, of a courageous, heroic tale. Not the tale of a victim, not the tale of struggling and suffering, but the tale, the heroic tale where you do find love, where you do succeed, where you do find joy and happiness, where you live a long and healthy life, and where you die in peace. I set you free, my children, and your children. This is called the death arrow. This is everything that needs to die so that the new can be born with originality and power. And we put this to the fire. And I have the jaguar here bearing witness. The jaguar is the one that knows the ways between the world, beyond death, into infinity. As I said, all of those tragic stories free, they combust in the fire. I set them free. I set myself free from them. And hold the stick a little bit longer until it begins to burn down by itself. And now I would like for you to honor all of the ancestors that came before you, all of your biological line, the courageous men and women that endured suffering, that endure pain. Maybe they're the survivors of war. Maybe they had their own tests, they had their own challenges, their own hardships, their own difficulty. They loved the best way they knew how to. They lived and they loved flawed ways and very flawed ways, but we honored them for their sacrifice. We honor them for their courage. We honor them for who they have been, and we set them free. Thank you. I set you free. I honor you. I know that you had the best intentions. I know how much you suffered in all of your lives. I know you were in the grip of fate, that you were dealing with forces bigger than you were. And I set you free. I send you my love. I forgive you. And I thank you for all of the gifts and lessons that you offered me. And release them. Set them free. Call on the lineage of medicine men and women from the spirit world to receive them and to take them to places of healing, to places where they may recover their souls, where they may become whole, where they may know that they have been forgiven, that they are good, that they are healed, and that they are well. This is the ancestor altar, where we elevate the ancestors to a place of honor, not because of what they accomplished, but because of what they attempted. And most of these attempts from most of our ancestors ended up in pain and in failure, failed at love, failed at business, failed at life, failed at mothering, failed at fathering. But they attempted, and we honor them for that. We celebrate them and we honor them for attempting to live their lives in ways perhaps that we did not understand, but with the greatest courage that they could muster. We honor you for that. And this is very different from the approach that psychology takes. Psychology takes the approach that we hold our ancestors, our mother, our father, our lineage responsible for who we've turned out to be. Maybe we were not given the love we needed. Maybe we were not given the environment. Maybe we were not given the support, the encouragement. We were not told how good we were or how loved we were. And therefore, we hold them responsible. That path leads to nowhere, only to more pain and more suffering. We must thank them for their love, even flawed as it was, even distorted as it was, even chaotic and painful as it was to you. Find that place where you can give them gratitude, express your gratitude, knowing that only gratitude will set you and them free. Not blame, not using them to explain why you're a victim of or the grandchild of a recovering. No, it will let you go on your own heroic journey when you elevate them to the ancestral altar, when you turn them over to the lineage of healers in the spirit world that can help them find their peace. And now we close our Viracocha, we gather the folds of this radiant sun into an orb of light above our heads, knowing that this is the light of the Christ, the light of the Buddha that you have as well, and bringing that light into your body, healing your body, reinforming it, receiving those gifts that are available to you. No matter how terrible those gifts were offered to you, some of us had ideal homes and ideal parents, but then we look a little bit deeper and we see that they also suffered greatly, as we also continue to suffer. The suffering has ended. The time now is a time to become the author of our own stories and at the same time of a new story for humanity, a heroic, courageous, compassionate, loving, joyful story of humanity as stewards and as caretakers of all life. Thank you for joining me for Shaman 21. Do your fire ceremony, release your ancestors, set yourself free.